Hey guys, welcome back to the Jeweler's View. Today on the Jeweler's View, I want to talk about something that comes up often when jewelers start thinking about building a line of work. Efficiency at the bench and how to create repeatable design elements. A few episodes back, I talked about this, developing a 3 to 5 piece collection. Instead of designing endlessly new pieces and coming up with new elements, you start with one strong design element, so like a through line, a form, a texture, or a pattern. And we build a small family of pieces, and I'm not asking you to go 10 pieces, let's do 3 to 5, and we build around that kind of signature centerpiece. To do that well, jewelers need tools that allow them to repeat forms and details with consistency. One of the tools that has helped jewelers, and I know helped us back in the school to create form and repeated design, repeated elements that we needed, is the hydraulic press. So today I'm joined by Peter Gilroy, the maestro of Bonny Doon Engineering. And this is a company that has been around, I don't know if y'all realize, building presses and forming tools for jewelers for more than 35 years now. So we're celebrating our 35th this year with Peter. And Peter, for listeners who may know the Bonny Doon name, but not the full story, can you give us the short version of Bonny Doon and your role in the company today? Welcome, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Courtney. Bonny Doon was born 35 years ago in Bonny Doon, California, tiny little village just north of Santa Cruz. And it was an engineer, Lee Marshall, who was taking a course at a local community college in jewelry. He'd had an accident, an industrial accident at work, and so took time off of work and was getting education. He started learning like, oh, there's jewelers out there making these presses, and everybody was welding up these funky little steel boxes, and honestly, things weren't really that safe. People were doing some cool stuff and then making some amazing things. But he saw that and he was like, all right, cool, I can engineer this press to be better and to be more ergonomic, and most importantly, to be safe and to be very rigid so that we can handle 20 or 100 tons of pressure without danger, you know. So that's kind of the genesis of Bonny Doon. And my uncle, Phil Poirier, had been a jeweler for a long time. He got into hydraulic forming on his own. He read a paper about it that was published by Mark Payson. He read this paper and was like, wow, this seems really cool. And there's the idea of like being able to use a hydraulic press, make dies, and do repeated work. And so the very first die he made, it's actually sitting right behind me here. He made it out of what's called DevCon steel epoxy, and it's this cool technique that we're still, still a valid die technology to this day. And he made his first little die, but he didn't have a hydraulic press. He didn't have anything. He did have a, 7,000 pound diesel truck sitting out in the front yard. So he took the jack out of his truck that you'd use to change tires, went out there, put the jack under the front end of his big Ford truck, put the die on top of the jack, and then he used that and actually lifted his truck up. So now all of a sudden he has like 5,000 pounds or force or something, 2 to 3 tons of force on that die. And so that was like his moment of being like, oh, wow, this is really amazing.
Right. If we could create a controlled experience, right, at the bench for this that doesn't require a diesel truck. Yeah.
Yeah. And he had a mentor that he learned raising from, who was like, you have a finite number of hammer beats in your arm.
Sure.
And so him wanting to explore, wanting to do big vessels, all this other stuff, he's like, okay, how can I make this easier? And how can I, preserve my like strength and
right.
for being able to do that. So that was kind of what led him into that. So Phil started working with Lee from pretty early on in the beginning, 91 or 92. And Phil is a master goldsmith, engraver, stonecutter. And so he helped to design a lot of the tools. The 3-inch form box for doing silhouette dies and non-conforming dies was the first tool that Phil designed, and then Lee started producing. And so that sort of like synergistic relationship went on for quite a while. Lee developed all sorts of big presses. They were doing crazy stuff. I mean, we still have what's called the volume and form press, and with it we can take an 18-inch disc and turn it into a 12-inch diameter hemisphere.
Wow.
Um, and so yeah, and it's like so that was some of this fun stuff that like Lee and with Phil's help was working on.
That is so cool. Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
you're really
wild.
you're stretching the what we think of the limitations with metal, right? Like there's a perceived limitation in our mind. You can only move it this much. You can only stretch it this much. I was just watching some of
Mhm.
your videos of like the actual presses in action, and it's like, guys, this is more malleable than we realize, right?
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's tough to get people to kind of like understand and conceptualize that because I mean, like I've learned forging, I've learned all the traditional hammer techniques and stuff like that, and you can feel the metal. It's really cool. You're maybe putting 4,000 pounds into a piece of silver when you're like wailing at it with a big hammer, and so now all of a sudden that you put 40,000 pounds into that, an order of magnitude different, and like you move metal as if it were clay, right? And I think that's the only thing I can kind of explain is that like all of a sudden that silver becomes like soft clay, and the way it moves is it's amazing.
Yeah, you can
Um,
stretch it to its limits,
yeah,
and it
yeah, and like
toughens it up, right? So it's hardening it as we go, and like
yeah,
the crystalline structure is becoming tighter and tighter as you stretch it, right?
yeah. There's huge benefits to cold forging and die striking in the way. Like Phil and
Mm.
I've written papers on this and done cross sections of metal, and you see like the amount of strength and the way that the grain actually aligns with the piece. Um, and gets tighter and longer, and so you actually build up a ton of strength, and it's crazy because we can do these like hollow forms in gold, and we've done it before, like maybe 10 thousandths thick. What would that be? Like 28 gauge, maybe
Mm-hmm.
30 gauge. And we can die strike that in gold hollow, solder that onto a silver piece, and then bend that into a ring. And that hollow form, which you think would be kind of fragile, right? This is like 18 karat or 22 karat gold. That hollow form doesn't collapse when you bend it into a ring. And
Wow.
part of that's like the strength that we get from die striking these pieces, and part of that's the beauty of the urethane that we're using in like the hammers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
On the press, we use urethane for almost everything.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I started
Yeah.
as as a blacksmith, right? So I was in
Oh,
blacksmithing
yeah.
school and welding technology and thinking that was my path, in the beginning.
Hmm.
And so watching these guys, we worked with the power hammer and all of these big machines that could stretch and push the material. But it reminds me of this, like almost like in a sense, and you're right, there's only a certain amount of hammer blows we have in our bodies. Like,
Hmm.
a lot of us as we get older too, you're going to start feeling that repetition and those. I have a friend who's been twisting metal for years, and she's feeling it so much in her arm in her 60s and 70s now that she's
Yeah.
having to really take care of it in a different way. So I think having the equipment that can take out some of it, create more longevity for our
Yeah.
and sustainability for our bodies and our businesses, right?
Oh yeah, and I think we've all been there. I mean, prepping for a show and stuff, and yeah,
Right.
you're spending 12, 14 hours a day at the bench, at the press, doing all that stuff, and
Yeah.
yeah, it hurts. It adds up. I just was working with a client who has tendonitis, and I was like, oh yeah, like I've gone through a couple different bouts of various tendonitis in my jewelry career, and like
Mm-hmm.
that's
You
where I
you
was lucky to
know.
have
Yeah.
the press and the electric, and I'm like, okay, I can still work even though like right now I can't saw very well because my like wrist is so messed up.
Yeah, so I love this story about Phil, and I know Phil
Yeah.
Poirier. He's such a great guy. This is your uncle, and I love
Hmm.
that like Bonnie Doon's being kind of passed down at this point, right? And you took it over. What a lot of there's a lot of family businesses out there, Peter, but what drives you to continue this business forward? Because we have a choice. You didn't have to do that, right? Like, what helped you
Yeah.
decide?
Yeah, to be honest, I was really busy making wedding rings and jewelry, and like I found this cool little niche of like, outdoor people climbers and stuff, and my work worked, my work spoke to them, and I like that was actually, I was going great. Years ago, I went to a museum out in north of New York on the Hudson River called Dia Beacon, and we got to meet with what was called this guy that was out there that was an artist engineer. And he wasn't an artist, but he worked with the best artists around the world. And he was the guy that like these incredible artists went to be like, how do I build this? How do I do this? And talking to him was really inspirational. And that like, I was like, oh, wow, you're the person that actually makes dreams come true, like brings these things to life. And I'm kind of a nerd. I love technology. I love like the presses and die making and all this stuff. So I guess that was sort of what ultimately inspired me to take over Bonny Doon, purchase the company, and start running it. And was that ability to now like help other people make beautiful art, make jewelry, um, and lend my experience and my kind of nerdy background in all of these technologies, and lend that
Yeah.
to other artists out there.
I love that. Yeah, that's a solid mission, I think, right? That one that it's so important. I think we tune into why we're doing what we do. I mean, I know you well enough, Peter, to know like you're working very hard on this company, that you're there on weekends. Today's the Saturday, right? We're hanging out and
Yeah.
doing this on a Saturday. This is what you do when you own a business, is we really do give it 150% as much as we can. And so that mission underneath why you're doing it's so important. So it's mainly about sharing knowledge for you. All right. I liked your mission statement you shared the other day. Let's see if we can
Yeah.
recapture that a little bit.
I think, yeah, our mission here, my mission in running the business, which I do think it's critical to have a mission. Like you said, it's like it's a Saturday. It's a beautiful. It feels like summer here in Taos, and it's like spring, and like, but I'm psyched to come to work because there's like a reason for me to do what I'm doing. But our mission here is to really to help you, the artist, the jeweler, to make beautiful things. To make dreams come true. For me, it's really exciting to like, I have these visions in my head, and when I can make those visions reality as an artist, it's like the most amazing, fulfilling thing. And it's
Yeah,
fun. I've gotten to work with a lot of people now the last 5 years, um,
I
and
bet.
before. But to be like, oh yeah, they'll have this idea, and I'm like, oh cool, I know how to make the tool to make that a reality. Um,
Right. And it's the
you know,
problem solver in you too. I think like the scientist, right? Like you keep
yeah,
calling yourself a nerd, it's like, yeah, you like to
yeah,
solve problems, and I think that's what an hydraulic press is for, right? It's to solve, essentially to identify and solve a problem with customization or what have you with the equipment.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, in so many different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about die forming for a little bit. So
Yeah.
with metal prices where they are right now, jewelers are thinking so much more carefully about how they use material and even what material they're using at this stage, right? One of
Hmm.
the interesting advantages of die forming is that jewelers can often use thinner metal while still creating strong forms. Can you explain
Yeah.
why die forming can be so much more efficient with material, especially right now? This is so up right now.
Yeah, oh, yeah, for sure. Especially like say we're working in gold and at yeah, five
Which we're
thousand
still going to
dollars.
do. We're still going to do, right? Yeah.
It's an
Yeah.
amazing material and it has so much value.
Yeah.
But you can't cast, you know, 30 gauge gold sheet into forms. Like there are limitations in casting, and even if you can, you also have strength issues when you're talking about that. So yeah, die striking, essentially the heart of die striking all goes back to we call conforming dies, a positive and a negative steel die, hardened tool steel. It can give you like insane detail in thin sheet, and it can do it with relatively low pressures because you have the strength of that steel forming your metal. But because we have milled sheet, we get nice long grain when we're milling our sheet, and then when we die strike it, we further refine that grain structure. So casting tends to create large grain structure. It's tougher to polish. It's not as strong, but that tighter grain structure really makes things strong. Um, and there's a feel to it. I think the biggest thing for me is the finishing part of it. Is
Right.
it's effortless. It's amazing. You can take
Wow.
stuff and, hit it real quick and you're like, boom, polished and done.
So
Especially the higher.
when it's hardened like that, you mean it's easier to polish?
Yeah, and it's just because you have this much smaller, tighter grain as well, and if the die is finished properly in tool steel, then the die itself is like nearly polished, and so it imparts that to your finished piece.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Oftentimes, I actually go back and I'll add texture to pieces in the background. Um,
Yeah.
you know, I design a lot of dies so that the backgrounds will have texture to kind of create that like better contrast and relief. But
Nice.
just the strength from that, the whole technology allows us to work with super thin metal in ways that we can't. One of
Mm,
the things too I like about it is that die. So like we can make a die and we can use it in multiple different ways. If it's designed right, we can also use it with different thicknesses of metal. So I've done pieces where I carved a little wild rose years ago, and I was die striking 18 karat gold in that and then doing a little tube set ruby, and I had all of a sudden this like nice $1,000 pair of earrings, and with like maybe $100 worth of gold at that time, maybe less. That was super nice. I could use that same die set with silver and do much thicker, chunkier earrings, as
okay.
and kind of a different process. So one of the benefits I like of that is I've got those dies. I can use them in various ways. And like somebody calls me up and says, "Hey, I get these in gold?" And you're like, "Boom, sure, I've got some gold here." And you can go and like die strike it and make that pair of earrings right away, or do it in
Amazing.
silver, or do it in rose gold. So what in like the manufacturing machining world is what we call lean manufacturing. But yeah, the ability to just sort of like throw the dies in the press and strike out what you need and
Right.
send it out. And
Yeah.
um, I mean, yeah, it's like a jeweler, and it's like that last minute order comes in, and
Yeah.
somebody's like, "Hey, can I come back in an hour to pick these up?" And you're like, "Well, if you're
Actually, yes.
casting
Yeah.
and you're out of them, no. If you've got the press here," and I have done that quite a bit, partially just from not,
Yeah.
like not planning ahead perfectly all the time, but I have the ability to like throw that little die on the press and you know
Yeah.
strike a new pair of earrings, and then
That's
do
amazing.
yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about just efficiency, right? And I think is that what you mean by lean manufacturing?
yeah, efficiency. Like I don't have to hold big inventory of stuff, and if I want to put on my website, like I mean, so we'll get back to like kind of talking about a collection, but
Mm-hmm.
say I want to have this little earring design and I want it in three different metals, and then I have like a pendant and I have a ring, um, kind of all similar design, but I can actually just hold a little tiny bit of material, and then when I get an order, I make that one piece in that metal. So instead of having like a tray of 30 finished pieces, I can just have a little stash of metal and make to order for that with die, especially with like shot plates
Nice.
or coining dies. So that's sort
Amazing.
of from the lean manufacturing. Old school manufacturing, you would just make like 100 pieces of each design, and then you would sit there with $40,000 in
Inventory.
jewelry, and
Right.
then try to sell it. And then if you don't sell it, you're like, okay, cool, I guess I'll melt this down and like recycle it. But you just wasted all that labor and time. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
So, what are some of the ways? Sorry, Peter, I'm kind of going on my own direction here. What are some of the ways that you've seen shop owners really make that efficiency like change their lives and change their business? Have you heard from customers? And I know it's not even just jewelry. You're working with knife makers, right? There's other
mhm.
manufacturing and studios that are starting to see the benefits of having a hydraulic press in their
Yeah,
shop.
there's all sorts of different stuff you can do with moving metal. I mean, I just worked with a guy who makes pen nibs, and I was able to just engineer a forming die and a cutting die, and I think in that capacity, I saved about 1 to 2 hours per piece. And so he's making a couple pieces a week. All of a sudden, like I just saved him 8 hours a week. So
Wow.
um,
Wow.
and that, like, obviously custom tooling costs more than standard tooling,
Mm-hmm.
but it really wasn't that much of an investment when you're like, okay, cool, like you just saved 6 to 8 hours a week. Multiply
Yeah.
that by 50, right? 50 weeks a year that you're working if you take a 2 week vacation. So,
Right. Right. It's worth it.
that's a
Yeah.
huge time saving. Like, wow, yeah,
Yeah.
how much is your time worth? I think all of us like underestimate what our time's worth. We underestimate how much time stuff goes, how much we underestimate how much time it makes to make stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
We
and
do.
being able to save some of that is huge.
Mm.
A lot of people, we've really helped them do stuff that they weren't able to do. And that's part of the beauty of the urethane. I mean, I remember working with a company that was doing filigree work, and for
Okay.
them to lay up like complex rings and bracelets and earrings flat and then form them without
Wow.
having any damage or defects. Um, and it
Oh,
took
wow.
very little pressure, but the like soft urethane in the press with the dies. And yeah, they were just like, they watched us doing the forming of these little gold filigree pieces that they brought over. And it was just, they were just sort of like,
Oh my
whoa,
God.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
just totally like
Mind
blew their
blown.
minds. And yeah, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, then, 2 minutes later, they had a press on the way to their shop,
Right.
so that
Right.
they could start doing that.
Yeah.
Artist, an amazing artist, Belle Brooke down in Santa Fe does really cool work with like millions of little tubes, and she does stone setting and like really cool, like really good, amazing eye for design. And yeah, she's able to lay out these big bracelets now. And I think for a while she didn't get into making bracelets because of you can't lay out all those tubes over a curved shape and solder that form. So with the press, she was able to do that flat and then bend the bracelet up. No deformation, no damage to that. And yeah, and she makes just some, yeah, out of the world stuff.
That's
So
amazing. Yeah. All right. Well, let's zoom it back a little bit for those who maybe for listeners who may be newer to the hydraulic press. Let's break down a few of these basic terms because I think Peter and I could talk shop all day. Sometimes I'm like, wait, Peter, what are you talking about? Because it's like a whole other language, right? It's like any craft you get into. I especially loved the blacksmithing terminology. It was pretty interesting. But yeah,
yeah.
I want to like break this down for those of you who are listening who don't quite understand what die forming is and how this works. Let's go back and give you just a little mini lesson from Peter, who's a great teacher. How would you explain what a die is in simple terms?
We say die all the time. It means a bunch of different things. The very general, like the big circle Venn diagram of dies is it's just a shaped tool that the metal is pushed over or into. It's really any kind of tool that helps us form the metal. That breaks down into different types of dies. So we talk about it as really the two main terms is forming and coining. And forming is when we're taking flat sheet and we're not really changing the flat sheet, but we're bending it into what can be very complex three-dimensional forms. Um,
Got it.
so yeah, that's if you kind of think of like you roll out a sheet of clay and then you like put it over a mold or something.
Yeah.
That would be forming. And techniques that we get into on the hydraulic press that are forming are like silhouette dies. Um, Non-conforming dies where we're using urethane to now push our thin metal sheet into like a brass or a steel die.
Mm-hmm.
And then even conforming dies where we're taking positive and negative steel dies and squishing our thin sheet into that. Coining is where we're all of a sudden taking this to a whole new order of magnitude pressure, and it's super fine detail. I always say you think about a coin, you get a brand new minted coin and you look at it with a loop, and there's details in there that you can't really see with the naked eye. Tremendous detail. When we're making dies, there's little subtle artifacts of like you can see the cutting tool leaves like tiny marks, and you'll see that in your piece of silver or gold. So, I mean, we're talking insane detail.
Wow.
And like a coin, like a medallion. And with that type of technique, we're talking high pressures, 60 tons per square inch, and we're talking hardened tool steel dies. There's kind of no way around that. And I did a whole paper trying to quantify like what that means, and it's there. There's a lot of like good science I put into it, but it's tough to say like it's a whole spectrum, I guess, with
Yeah.
detail is on a spectrum. So
Wow.
it's tough
Yeah.
to quantify it perfectly. Hopefully that was basic
Yeah.
enough.
No, that makes sense. So, because I think there's confusion between, okay, why would you use a non-conforming die? When does the
Mhm.
urethane come into the picture? Like, what is it? What are all these
Yeah.
for?
Yeah, and that's the tricky thing is conforming and non-conforming. I've tried for years to come up with better names for those dyes. A
Yeah.
conforming dye is the old school positive and negative steel dye, you know? And so like the dyes conform to each other. The non-conforming dye, we're really just using urethane as our other dye to push the metal into a rigid form. Um,
Okay.
the level of detail that we want in our piece is what dictates what materials we should be using.
Gotcha.
And that is
Yeah.
where that is a super broad spectrum of what materials we need, what pressure we need, what we can do. And I always tell people, like, you got to go back and be like, okay, what's your end goal? What material do you want to be working with? What kind of weight do you want it to have? And what level of detail do you want and where? Because
Okay.
there's ways we can get like fine detail in some ways, but not in others. And,
Gotcha. This is a whole other wheelhouse, like to open up, I think, as far as efficiency, detail, repeating designs, like repeating elements, like we were talking about. How does the pressure of a press allow jewelers to achieve textures and patterns that could maybe be hard or impossible to do by hand?
well, oh man, I could get into this real deep, real quick. I think
Yeah,
one of the
right?
amazing things is like there's only like you can sit down and you can hammer metal. You can, shape the head of your hammer and you can get different designs. But there is a point where you're just pushing down into the metal with the hammer. And so you are limited to the exact forms you can get with that. It's also not as precise. But now, essentially, like a lot of the stuff I've done is you take that hammer texture and you do that. Maybe you make a little punch and you do that into tool steel and you put that really precise hammer texture into a piece of hardened tool steel. And now you press your metal into that, and suddenly you have the negative of what you can hammer. Yeah, some people are like, so what does that matter? And it's, getting into certain levels of detail
Hmm.
and like having nice, sharp, crisp edges coming up out of your jewelry. You can't do that with a hammer or with casting, but with coining, you can because you're squeezing that metal down into those sharp points and getting,
Right.
I mean, like razor sharp edges if you want them,
Hmm.
where you actually have to polish stuff out to make it wearable.
Right. Right.
A lot of my textures, and that's like the thing talking about design for manufacturing, talking about like doing
Yeah.
little collections of 3 to 5
Cohesion.
pieces.
Yeah, cohesion
Um,
in the collection.
yeah, I was kind of a total texture nerd, and that was a lot of my bodies of work. Like the first one was this like granite texture, this crystalline granite texture. It took me 8 hours to make the first die that I did for that, but I've probably pressed 5,000 pieces on that. And
Wow.
so what I did in that case is I took that granite texture and then I cut it into little 3/8 of an inch circles as stud earrings. And I did little like diamond shapes as pendants and earrings.
There you go.
Added stones, did flush set diamonds, did gold inlay and blackened some. And all of a sudden that one die very quickly created 3 to 5 pieces. I mean, I got lucky with that texture. I've done ponderosa pine bark. I've done sandstone texture. I've played
Wow.
with a lot of them, and
Mm.
all of those have turned into really cool collections. The granite one just, I mean, it blew up. I've spent now 10 years developing that collection essentially,
Yeah.
to the point where I actually just went back and made a huge die to use in my 300-ton press so I could do a belt buckle in that granite texture.
Oh, how cool is that?
Um,
Yeah.
which, yeah, is super rad to be able to do that.
So essentially, you have a die that you're using to repeat these textures, right? And so if you're creating a piece, if you're trying to do that by hand, to me, that's essentially so much more time consuming. I mean, this way you can
Yeah.
actually start to repeat these elements, lay them out, and create work with those to create a
Hmm.
really cohesive line that your customers can collect, come back for the next
Yeah.
piece, right? They can relate to it. It's
Yeah.
cleaner in presentation to me to have elements that repeat, right? Elements that repeat themselves in each piece of
Yeah.
the collection.
Collection and collectors. I have clients that come back to me every year for a new granite piece, and like because I made their wedding rings 7 years ago
Right?
in the granite texture and gold, and now it's like every anniversary, like they get a new granite piece and stuff like that. So
Oh,
there
I
is that
love
like nice
that. Yeah.
through line in the work.
Love
Um,
it. Yeah. Okay, we got to
and
talk a little. Oh, go ahead, Peter. Finish your
oh
thought.
no, anyways, I could kind of go on all day about like using the
Texture.
textures. And I think too, I mean, for me, it's like I'm not I can't draw. I have to force myself to draw a lot of times. I'm like, thank God I'm a jeweler and an artist in that way because
Right.
like I can't make beautiful things on paper, but I can like tweak and refine stuff. So for me, I can spend a lot of time on a die and just keep refining it, refining it, refining it, and then I can use that to stamp out my finished piece. Um, and
Nice.
that I really like and appreciate. Oh, you were
Did,
talking about the time though. So the first pair of like these granite earrings I made in niobium, I actually just used a hand like I made custom punches,
mm,
little like chasing tools, and I sat there and I think it took me like 4 hours to make this little tiny pair of earrings for my mom. And this was almost 15, 12, maybe 15 years ago now. They were okay. The texture wasn't as crisp and sharp and beautiful as I wanted. And then all of a sudden I like put that 8, 10 hours into a die and was able to make a similar pair of earrings in like, from start to
wow.
finish doing everything, maybe 15, 20 minutes. And they
Wow.
were better too. It wasn't like in that specific thing, I didn't lose resolution or detail. It was actually like worlds better than the original piece I did by hand.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, this is reminding me, like I work in wax, right? I'm a waxer, I guess you
hmm
could say, or I started as a casting technician in the jewelry field. And so this is starting to really click for me thinking about making that really nice first master wax, like your prototype.
hmm
And getting it super crisp and clean so that every time you remake that piece, if you do decide to remake that piece, your mold is super clean, right? And so it's kind of
hmm
similar what you're doing in
hmm
fabrication terms and forming terms. It's a little
yeah.
bit opposite of the process, but it's the same result, right?
hmm
Somewhat. Hmm.
Yeah, very similar. And I think that the thing I appreciate about it is being more of a fabricator than a caster is like I can take those elements or those pieces and then I can add to it and I can develop it into all these different pieces. And I have seen you know, some people with casting, they think about creating one finished piece. But then I've seen a lot of people with casting too that they think about creating this like kind of broad, vague element that could be really like really cool. But then they can take that and do a bunch of stuff to it. So.
Amazing. So wait, let's talk for a little bit before we wrap up today, Peter, with everyone. I want to talk a little bit about the difference between a hobby press and a professional press. Because there are differences. I know when I was researching back at Creative Side in the day when we were looking at what kind of press do we want to teach with for our students, what makes the most sense as far as design of the press,
Hmm.
and we ended up bringing you guys down to work with our students. So I'm curious if you could explain to us what actually makes a press professional grade, and really what should jewelers be thinking about beyond tonnage when evaluating a press or price.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to say like, oh, 20 tons is 20 tons. Well, you can get a 20-ton Harbor freight press and it doesn't do the same thing that a 20-ton press does here. So one of the big things is you're talking about rigidity of the press, um, and ergonomics, and then you're talking about like the whole system of tools and how it works. So first off, in terms of rigidity, I mean, our presses are tested to, when we sell a 20-ton press, it's tested to 70 tons of force. At
Wow.
20 tons, there's almost immeasurable deflection of that frame. I mean, like with our machinist tools, we can measure and we can quantify that little bit of deflection. Something a lot of the hobby presses, I mean, we're talking inches of deflection at full 20 tons to the
Wow.
point where I've heard stories. I've thought about doing videos about this, but it sounds scary. But I've heard stories of like presses deflecting far enough that pieces go shooting out of them.
Oh my
And
gosh, yeah.
those are specifically, yeah, with like the shop, like automotive style presses. But
Okay.
like anybody can put a 20-ton ram and call it a 20-ton press, but whether the frame and like the whole system of tooling actually can support that effectively,
Hmm.
is a whole different thing. And now, if I put 20 tons of force into my die, but my press is flexing a lot, then I'm actually not putting that force down into my piece of silver or gold. So I'm not actually exerting that full pressure. So
I see.
rigidity, we do like advanced 3D modeling of our presses when we work on new designs, and we test that. We weld up prototypes, and then we bring them back here, and yeah, we'll throw a 100-ton ram in a 50-ton press and see what happens and work out all these weird worst case scenarios. So that's
Gotcha.
anyways a little bit about rigidity
And safety.
and safety. I think the thing is like in ergonomics is Phil was a
Hmm.
master goldsmith before he started working with presses. I've spent 15 years making thousands of pieces on these presses, and so how the fit and the function, how you can just like rotate tools and set up everything for like comfort is really critical. um, and that's really, that comes from, yeah, we have 65 years of experience as jewelers going
Yeah.
into how we do all of this. And I mean, a lot of times I'll pull out a tool, I'll use it, and I'll be like, I don't really like that funny little thing there. And like the next iteration of that will be fixed.
Right.
Most things, like most of those little repairs, like nobody notices. Um, but again, after 35 years of that level of refinement, it's not the same. Is I guess what I'm trying to
Sure.
say.
Yeah.
The
Well, you,
tools have been developed, and you can look at like, oh, okay, there's a ton of people in like ripping off our designs. But if they're not jewelers, like this company was born at the jewelry bench, came from frustrations at the jewelry bench, not from the boardroom, you know. And there's a lot of companies out there that's like, they're just trying to make more money. And so they miss a lot of those subtleties
sure.
in the end form.
Yeah. Well, I think those are
And
that's what makes good equipment, is those who are actually, or even a good polishing compound, a good, whatever it is that you're purchasing, is those companies who have the, let's call it desire, let's call it mission, where to actually get in the studio, utilize the equipment, apply it, the application of it should match the customer, right?
mhm,
Not assumption, not based on assumptions. Is kind of what I hear you saying, right? We're not assuming that this is going to work for the jeweler. We know because we are jewelers. We're making the
yeah.
equipment at the bench. Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, and we've tested it. And then I think the
Nice.
other part is like with we have 35 years of like backward and forward compatibility with all of our tools, with all of our like, if your jack wears out after 20 years and you bought a press from Lee Marshall in 1995, like I can send you a new jack and get you all upgraded, and like now you have a press that's good for another 20 some years. Um,
Wow. Yeah.
so
Yeah. You don't get that at Harbor Freight.
no,
Just
yeah,
saying.
no, with
Yeah. Yeah.
none of the companies out there are delivering that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's the difference when you're picking the company or organization or whatever, the manufacturer to work with, really these things should be considered in my eyes. It's so difficult now, I think, for a lot of companies like yours to, and even speaking with Guess Wine, Roger Guess Wine on another episode, it was like, we're really voting with our dollar, and we need to be conscious of that. I think a lot of us are racing to the bottom price and trying to get a studio set up under a budget, which I totally get. Money is tighter than ever, right? It is an
Hmm.
issue, but we're talking about longevity and a professional quality compared to a hobby quality, and those are two different things. You can go buy
Yeah,
tools at the hardware store or the we won't diss on Harbor Freight too much because there's some useful things there, that
I buy
disposable
stuff from Harbor
tools. Yeah.
Freight. Yeah,
Yeah, disposable tools have their place, right? But I loved, the idea of this upgrade tax. And you've
yeah,
mentioned in the past, what do you mean by upgrade tax? There's an upgrade tax
Y-
here for my friends.
yeah. Like, don't pay the upgrade tax. This turquoise press behind me here is our classic 20-ton press. I think it's our entry level press as a manual press, and you never have to replace that, and you will always keep using that. So you're not going to grow out of that. You can add an electric pump to it. You don't pay more for doing that 3 years down the road than you would pay now. Um, but that press is going to do so much for you. So you're not going to ever be limited by that press. I'm still not limited by that press 15 years into it. Now, like I've gone the direction of like really big, crazy coining dies, and so that requires pressure. So like
Yeah.
I now have a 300-ton press sitting over here in the corner. But that classic press I still use all the time.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess if you buy a cheap press, there's a lot of presses that have, unfortunately, like a lot of limitations in either like working volume, or tool, like the way they can attach tools, like how they can actually work. A
Yeah.
couple of the presses out there are just awkward to work at, and so it seems you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to pay $1,000 for a press instead of 1298 for a press. But then 2, 3 years into it, you're really getting serious. You're like making money. You want to be making more better jewelry, incorporating different techniques, and all of a sudden that press doesn't do it anymore.
Right.
And that's the upgrade tax. Then it's like, oh, okay, well now I have to invest in a different system, a different press that's going to do all the things I want to do.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and it's like, yeah, you buy a good quality, professionally designed press once, it's the whole buy once, cry once. But you're going to pay
Yeah.
off that investment in no time, and it's going to last you for, yeah, another 30 years. I mean, Jane Redmond, incredible jeweler, and
Hmm.
I love her videos. She's always using the press, and it says like 5 years of excellence, Bonny Doon Tools.
Oh,
And she
nice.
got her first press in like 1996 or so, whatever, somewhere in
Wow.
there.
Yeah.
And it's still working, and yeah, working great. I mean,
Yeah.
she's prolific as a jeweler. Does a
Yes.
lot of stuff with that press. So,
Oh, I would imagine. Yeah.
I mean,
Jamie.
yeah, when you look at it that way, you're like amortize. Like you spread out the cost of that investment on all of the pieces you're going to make with it, and it's like it's comical how cheap it is. Like it's not
Right.
even fractions of a penny at that point.
Right.
So,
Yeah. If you're using it, right? If you're using it. And I think, real quick too, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding with what a press is for. And I think there might be like, it may be that there's a cap to that, a ceiling to that. But I'm realizing the more I talk with you, there is so much more to what a press can do than the average person might realize, right? Unless they get the
yeah.
honor of taking a class with you or coming into your studio and getting a bunch of demos. Like, give us
Oh
like a
yeah.
kind of a quick hardcore list of what we could do. What's imaginable here?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people are just they buy a press because they want to cut out discs of metal, like throw a Swanstrom disc cutter in there and pop out discs, or get blanking dies in like cutout forms. And a lot of people, or silhouette dies. That's a common technique that's taught in schools and colleges around the country. And so a lot of people are like, oh, that's you get this cool little puffy shape. But yeah, I mean, I'm 15 plus years into working on hydraulic presses, 16 years, and plus I grew up around them.
You were like a
But
little
16
toddler with
years,
the press. I could just see it.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, you used to like put pennies through the rolling mill, but we'd squish stuff in the press as well.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah.
and I remember Phil in the corner had this like big black 50-ton press that, was like
Wow.
this kind of scary looking tool back in the day.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but I'm like, yeah, 15, 16 years into making dies, and like there's so much more I want to make and want to do with it. Yeah, I've just been playing with deep draw, working on some vessels, and there's this whole line now that it's like that I've gone down where I'm deep drawing vessels and then pressing those into forming dies and getting these really cool shapes.
Very cool.
There's not really an end to
Yeah, that's probably
what I
hard
can
for you,
dream of doing with the
right?
press, because there's just more dies, different types of dies, 3D printing and casting dies. Like there's so many different avenues to get
To
there,
go. And you're still not even
as
done
well.
yet. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're talking about vessels. We're talking about belt buckles. We're talking about, repeated textures and forms that you want to repeat in your work or use those
hmm
elements in different designs, right? Or different one of a kinds. What else? Let's make a list.
Yeah. I
I think
mean,
we think of
coins
like
and
bracelets and rings, but this is just a very small piece of what we're talking about here, of
Yeah,
what's
and one of the things
possible.
that I like is like now that I have my brain wrapped around like using the press, it makes a lot of other techniques easier and possible. So like I've been working on hand engraving and stone setting the last 2 years. Not as much time as I'd like to, but man, I absolutely love it. Yeah, being able to do that and then form those pieces on the press is really awesome, and
Amazing.
just makes things possible that can't be done other ways, you know.
Evenly by hand, right? Evenly and
Yeah,
consistency.
smooth and even,
Yeah.
and then yeah, also taking those techniques is part of why I like hand engraving is I'm hand engraving and chasing my own dies.
Right.
So now I can put this time into a die and then like have this little element. I think the most recent one is this little mountain range, the little kind of like geometric mountain range, and that's I've made a couple pieces with it. It's been super fun. I'll probably like keep pushing that line for a while, adding stones and doing stuff like that.
I
So,
love it.
I,
Yeah.
the press isn't a standalone technique either. Like it incorporates with every technique out there.
Mm.
I think guilloche engraving is a really cool one that like I've done a lot of. Really, Phil has done incredible stuff with. You can guilloche engrave um, these flat sheets and then form them into all sorts of crazy stuff on the press. Um,
So
so
fun. Yeah, it's endless.
yeah,
And 35 years, there's still no ceiling to it, Yeah, thanks for
yeah.
educating us today. What are you most excited about right now? What's the future look like for Bonnie Doon?
Back behind the camera here, I have these whole big boards of all of like my ideas and prototypes. So we have like, I mean, we'll have endless new cool tools coming out. But big part of what I'm most excited about is really sharing all of these techniques and these technologies with everybody. So we've put a lot of time into education and sharing as much as we're possible, really being able to like inspire and empower people to make their own dyes, do their own stuff. We have a really cool, can't talk too much about it right now. We're like ironing out the details.
Ooh, the
But
top
a
secret.
new,
Yeah.
top secret, we got more
Yeah.
top secret stuff. Yeah. But a new starter system to really get people like up and running and educating. And like day one, you're making finished pieces on the press.
Sweet.
Um,
Okay.
and I think that's going to be really cool. And it's, the idea is like, all right, you invest in a press. I'm doing everything I can in terms of education and in terms of tooling to have that press start making you finished jewelry and returning that investment in little time, very little time.
Excellent. Because I think that's one of the hangups for people sometimes is like, okay, I got to get the press, and now I got to get the tooling, and now I forgot this piece, right? What else do I need to make this function for me in the studio?
Hmm.
So having like a kind of a framework for that, no pun
Yeah, and
intended.
I think it's like what I try to like coach people with, and when I where it's like, okay, let's start small. Let's get one technique that you can like start doing and start incorporating into your work right now, and then we're going to continue to build for the next 150 years of our lifespans as jewelers, or
Yeah, that's
um,
quite a lifespan.
hopefully, because I got enough stuff to produce for the
Yeah,
next
right.
150 years.
I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah, I love it.
So
Peter, any last words for someone out there who's maybe just starting to think about introducing a hydraulic press? Anything we should know? Why is it such a powerful tool? What would be your suggestions for, learning more about this?
oh yeah, I mean, to learn more, I've got lots of resources available at bonnydoon.tools.com.
Yeah.
We do custom tooling. I do custom coaching for people, consulting essentially, like to help you solve your problems. I think like if you're looking at presses, it's going to help you build. It's going to help you repeat processes much better. So that when you want to go back and remake a piece later down the road, like you already have everything in line and you can go and pop that out real quick and get going, not be wasting time on
Trying to,
hand working a piece or trying to like reinvent the wheel every time you go to do that one process. So I really think it's one of the most versatile machines in a studio. It pairs so well with everything else.
yeah,
So
it takes everything to a whole different level. I think we think
yeah,
of it as only specific for this, but no, it applies, like you're saying, to filigree, to vessel forming, to belt buckles, to all the things like that. I mean,
yeah.
beyond
I
that,
mean,
Hmm.
1/4 inch thick titanium bracelets I've bent on my press. So
Wow.
like filigree to that is like opposite worlds, right?
Right?
But
Yeah,
that,
totally
and that's
different.
just a small snippet of what it can do. And then, we're also really, we're providing the tech support and the education for that. So,
Which is so
um,
important. Yeah, so important.
yeah,
It's one thing I think all of us love tools. We love shiny things. Where there's a little bit of a tool addiction crisis going
yeah,
on out there, and that's part of what I do is talk. Hey, is this a distraction? Is it something you're really ready for? Right? Do you need this tool? Is it time to introduce it? And so I think
hmm
having that education piece and somewhere they can go that they can trust and know that it's been tested and you have proof. There's social proof, right? There's decades of it that this has been an
yeah.
efficient tool to introduce, and we've
There's
seen them win.
centuries there's
Yeah.
centuries of it. I mean, that's the thing. It's not like just some new
Wow.
technology, but like
Yeah.
ancient Greeks used essentially stamps for forming some of their like very amazing, elaborate work, and then they'd go in and they'd hand chase it. But yeah, starting around the 1700s or so, like presses started to become big part of jewelry production, coin production, and stuff like that.
Way
So
before the
we have
diesel
many.
truck.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Before the diesel truck, exactly. So,
That's wild. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're gonna have to reconvene and do a whole history on this now because I didn't realize how far back this went. Um,
yeah,
yeah. Oh my gosh, so much to learn. You guys check out BonnyDoonTools.com. There is so many great papers that Peter and his uncle Phil have written over the years. That's how I met you guys. Was probably back at Santa Fe Symposium in Albuquerque
yeah.
with Rio Grande, and hearing the details of what this equipment can bring to life. And really, it's doing things like Peter says that you can't do with the hand.
Yeah.
There's a you just can't. You can't, or in casting. So it's a whole other world to look into, a whole other addition to your
hmm
toolbox.
In some ways, it'll help you do things faster and easier, and in other ways, it'll help you do things that like you couldn't have dreamed about,
Yeah.
before you had that press. Um, and that's super cool. And it does take, an investment in time and practice, but yeah, that's also what we're really trying to do is like get you up and running and using that press every day. Even if pieces that I like might use totally different techniques on, I'll go and I'll usually do a final like doming on the press or something like that to
Yeah.
really make like my finished pieces much more dynamic than like flat sheet. So,
To
just
bring a
even that is
dimension. Yeah.
is really cool. But I hear stories occasionally, people are like, I bought a press and I'm scared and it's been sitting in my garage for 5 years. And so
Yeah.
that's where we got like all these YouTube videos and stuff because I like it takes a lot of time and work and my poor back making a lot of these tools. I don't want them to go sit in somebody's garage. I
Yeah.
want you to I want you to buy a press and make tons of money off it and make amazing art from it. So,
I love
anyways,
that. I love that. Talk about bringing dreams to life, right? Like, help you bring your dreams to fruition. Like, what are you imagining that you could make? This is one of those things that can bring it to life. And
yeah.
luckily there's some good trustworthy companies out there you can look to and get the equipment you need to bring it to life to make it happen. So, Peter, thank you so much. I can tell how passionate you are about what you do. And thank God for the Peter Gilroys because I wouldn't know the first thing about building a tool like this or creating the tooling and the customization that you put together for companies so they can bring those things to life I used to work with
Yeah.
artists. We would sit there for weeks trying to, figure out what it is they were trying to do, and they weren't quite there. And so having this equipment that can just make it happen quicker is excellent. Thank you for joining us. Anything else you want to share with
Yeah.
everybody today?
No, I mean, I think just like continuing that point, like I've learned from so many amazing mentors out there. My uncle Phil Poirier, Eddie Bell of Rio Grande. We've worked with lots of them incredible companies like Tim Sheriff at Swanstrom, Kate Wolf, Jane Redmond. These are all the other tool makers out there that
Yeah.
are like putting their time into developing tools that are really actually useful and really practical. And yeah, you do pay a premium for that. We're all making tools in the US too. So it's not cheap to do that. But all of these tool makers are making really incredible stuff. And without the people developing the tools, then all of the companies that are like ripping off stuff and getting it made overseas wouldn't be making anything at all. So,
Yeah.
when you can, you got to do what you got to do. I've been an artist. It's like tough to like be able to afford everything. But yeah, when you can, all these tool makers, supporting them goes a long way.
Absolutely. Direct to the source or direct to their retailer, right? I think
Yeah.
is important. And be careful when you're buying some things. I remember trying to save money or a few bucks here and there because it did feel very important, and it is important. Buying torches, for example, from overseas and having them explode in people's hands. Like, you really do, there's a safety issue here that I want to encourage everybody. Just be careful, do your research. Read the reviews, make sure the company's reputable, make sure that there's a
Yeah.
return policy, right? Check in on all these things. If you're looking to save a few bucks here and there, it could end up costing you a lot more. So just
Yeah.
be conscious of that. And we want to support each other. We're here to support each other and lift each other up and keep these companies thriving and surviving, so that they're not only surviving but thriving, so
Yeah.
that they can continue to solve problems for us at the bench. I'm really passionate about what you guys bring
I
to the
mean, I think,
table. So.
yeah, a rising tide lifts all boats. And like we've had great collaborations with other companies over the years. Yeah, had incredible collaborations. And I think, yeah, like that sort of, oh man,
Camaraderie,
okay.
commerce,
Yeah, that sort of,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's like
Hmm.
really amazing. And like it makes it better. There's a couple of companies that have just like literally taken our designs and I'd be like, man, if you spent more time like designing better tools that were unique designs, we'd actually like this whole industry would be better for it.
Right.
Instead, it's just sort of like washing it out,
Yeah, yeah, and
So,
making
but
probably turning people away from it essentially, right? Because
yeah,
it's like it's not made correctly. It's not going to be utilized correctly. So, all right, we could geek
yeah,
out on this all day, Peter, because I know we're so
yeah,
aligned on this fact of, we're voting with our dollar. I love Roger Guesswine put it that way. We're voting
yeah,
every day, every time you buy a piece of equipment. Think about where that's going and be conscious of it. As a collective, we can take care of each other in all kinds of different ways. So, all right, Peter, thank you again. Everybody listening, thanks for joining us. And don't forget to check out BonnyDoonTools.com. Peter is right there. He's an actual human, not a robot. I don't think you're a robot. We'll have to look under the hood one of these days and see. Those of you making tools, sometimes I'm like, wow, what's going on in the
yeah.
brain? But thanks for joining us, and you guys definitely check that out and check out all the new things that Bonny Doon's going to bring to life over the next decades. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah. Thanks, Courtney.